Welcome back. We are going to continue our discussion of what I call the scramble, what historians call the scramble for Africa, following the close of the international slave trade. And we talked in the last session about why it was that Great Britain felt obliged to shut down not only its own slave trade, but then the international slave trade, prevent other nations from slave trading endeavors. We are confronted then at the beginning of the 19th century with a situation in which the principal trade relationship between Europe and Africa has been significantly altered. The principal trade relationship was the trade relationship of slavery. And in the context of the British shutting down the international slave trade, we see the reasons that for the next 50 or 60 years, there is a relative domination by the British over Africa. The slave trade dominated by the British meant, among other things, that it had developed trading relationships with African nations, African peoples. And in the context of Britain as the major naval power on the planet, and in the context, and I can't I can't overstate the importance of this second factor, in the context of Britain as the predominant economic power on the planet, as the sole power in the first half of the 19th century to have achieved industrialization, to have undergone the Industrial Revolution. That in the context of those two factors, Britain wins simply by demanding that Africa be open to free trade. Free trade means this. Free trade means that all comers are treated equally. But if you are the strongest naval power, and if you are the strongest industrial power, free trade means that you win. So from Britain's standpoint, to demand that Africa remain an open trading ground for all comers means that Britain is going to dominate the trade with Africa. And in fact, during the first half of the 19th century, that is the reality. That's the reality, that Britain dominates trade with Africa. By the middle of the century, however, we see a number of new factors entering into the equation in the relationship between Europe and Africa. And I should back up for a second and just add this point. If free trade is the dominant thing that's happening relative to Africa, if Britain can dominate Africa through the mechanism of free trade, then there's no need for colonies. And in fact, colonies are a detriment to the power that benefits from free trade. A colony, if France establishes a colony in Africa, automatically that means that trade with that colony is cut off from Britain. So Britain wants to keep Africa clear. But a new element begins to enter the relationship between Europe and Africa by the middle of the 19th century. By the middle of the 19th century, Britain is beginning to lose its industrial monopoly. That is to say that France and what is becoming Germany, Germany is not yet a single state by the middle of the 19th century, but it's on the road to becoming a single large state, and it is industrializing. That France and Germany and the United States too are beginning the steps towards industrialization. And it is in that context that a new relationship is going to develop between Europe and Africa. And that is what I will talk about in our next session.